The plot idles for a while before it revs up to full throttle. That's a chainsaw joke. Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a single book review of My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. So this is a horror book, I guess, that comes out at the end of this month, so August 2021. I got this book as an e-arc from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley and thank you to the publisher, Simon & Schuster Canada, Gallery, Saga Press. Thank you for the arc. I very much appreciated it and very much enjoyed it. This is one of those books that is like a solid read throughout, but has an absolutely killer ending. The last 10% of this novel is utterly fantastic. What is this book? I honestly requested this book on NetGalley just because I liked the title. I haven't read any of Stephen Graham Jones' other books, even though a few of them are on my TBR. I just haven't got around to it yet. I don't read a ton of horror or even thrillers, so I was actually surprised that they accepted me, but thank you that they did. Anyway, what is this book about? So this is from the blurb, and one part of it I actually think simplifies the book too much and I disagree with, but I'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, Jade Daniels is an angry, half-indigenous outcast with an abusive father, an absent mother, and an entire town that wants nothing to do with her. She lives in her own world, a world in which protection comes from an unusual source, horror movies, especially the ones where a mass killer seeks revenge on a world that wronged them. And Jade narrates the quirky history of Prufrock as if in one of those movies. But when blood actually starts to spill into the waters of Indian Lake, she pulls us into her dizzying encyclopedic mind of blood and mass murderers and predicts exactly how the plot will unfold. So after an utterly creepy and tone-setting first chapter, the story takes a bit to acclimatize to, as the novel follows Jade in third person, but also manages to contain the unreliable narrator trope. It was really interesting, actually. I've never really encountered that before. So Jade hides things from the reader, from people who care about her and herself. It's clear throughout the novel that she's suffered a lot in her young life, and she hides this pain in her obsession with slasher films. Despite what the blurb says, it's too simplistic to say that Jade identifies with the slashers in the films. What I think is that Jade wants to be a final girl, a good girl, a girl not only with a loving family, but a girl able to overcome the horrors she is faced with. Jade wishes she had suffered the terrors of a final girl in a slasher, being chased around by a mass murderer, because that trauma is preferable to her real life. But Jade does not think she deserves to be a final girl. She believes she's simply a minor character intended to help the final girl along. And that's part of the tragedy of her story. She just has no sense of self-worth. And it's really heartbreaking. The novel does a fantastic job with Jade's characterization and arc while keeping her from becoming a stereotypical final girl in the end, the one that she so wishes to be. You just want to, hug her and say, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. I also thought the not-so-subtle comments on the treatment of Indigenous people and lands was well delivered, and it tied well to the overall end and theme of the novel. I thought that was a really great addition and something that is... And these kind of poignant things are often overlooked in horror novels, and I thought that was a really interesting facet. The novel is also very clever. Calling the town Prufrock, even though it's spelled not like T.S. Eliot's poem, was a fun allusion, and it was a bit of foreshadowing as well. But it's clever more in terms of the slasher movie aspects. It's clear Jones loves slasher films, and his breadth of knowledge is superb. He references not only the main films we've all seen, like Texas Chainsaw and Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, blah, 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 but very obscure ones like Prophecy and Thanksgiving and The Burning. So slashers are not my favorite genre. I prefer ghost stories. But my partner is obsessed with 80s horror movies in any capacity, so we have seen almost every single one that Jones mentions, and he mentions a lot. And I love how Jones ties in the themes from these movies to the themes of My Heart is a Chainsaw. It was so much fun, and I really liked that kind of interpolation effect, and but as well as the breaking the fourth wall aspect too. It was a really cool balance that I totally got behind. Unfortunately, the plot idles for a while before it revs up to full throttle. That's a chainsaw joke. The novel lulls quite a bit in the center as well, and at times I wasn't sure kind of where it was going. The prose was also a little confusing at times, where I wasn't really sure what had just happened, like I'd have to go back and reread it, or I felt like I was missing something later on, something that I probably just didn't get because of how the prose functioned. It didn't, it's not like it didn't work for me. I just didn't feel as comfortable in it as I would some other novels. It's also not very scary for a horror novel, like the first scene aside. The first scene's really good. I do wish the rest of the novel kind of carried that vibe, but aside from, the part of the start, nothing of the novel really scared me. The thing is, though, slashers are not scary to me. They don't scare me at all. So that might be why I wasn't that afraid. I'm of the mentality that, if it bleeds, I can kill it. So I'd be more likely to go after a slasher person with my own weapon than run away screaming from them. I probably would not be a final girl. I would be the one that tries to attack the person at first and die right away. But that's fine. It doesn't scare me as much as ghosts. Ghosts. Don't get me started on ghosts. There was also a big thing that happens in the novel that didn't make sense to me because it should have drastically impacted the action later on, but it seemed to have been forgotten about. That irked me a little bit. Either that or I wasn't understanding it correctly, but I don't think that's the case. Anyway, I'm not going to say what it is because it's just a spoiler. I'm also of two minds about these little essay chapters. So every chapter or so, there's these kind of mini 2-page essays that Jade's writing to her history teacher. They're interesting, but I found that at first they were distracting. They did grow on me though, and there's one at the very end about Jaws that's really, really good. So I guess I'd say that I liked those things, but I didn't need them in the story. All that being said, I really enjoyed this novel. I didn't love the book enough to give it 5 stars, but I think anyone who loves slashers will definitely appreciate this book, as will anyone who likes their horror thematically poignant and not just, there for scares. It's a really smart, interesting horror book, and it makes me want to go and watch a horror movie. So thank you again to NetGalley and the publisher for the e-arc. I really enjoyed it, and the title is fantastic. One of the best titles I've come across this year, I think. So thank you for watching. Have you read this book? Have you read any of his other books? I know there's a couple popular ones. I just haven't gotten around to reading them yet. Maybe I'll make that a goal for next year. Yeah, so let me know in the comments, and thank you.